All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to AI Tools for Library Research. This is part three. This is the final installment of our three-part series on information in a digital world. We've gone through, and we'll get a brief recap in a moment, but we've gone through the whole information ecosystem as it currently stands. We talked about ethics, and now we're talking about the actual tools that we use or we can use in library research that have an AI component or an LLM component. But before we get too far in, I do want to introduce you to our teaching team this afternoon. I'll introduce myself. My name is Christopher Jimenez. I am the Associate Web Services Librarian, and I will kick it over to Anthony to introduce himself.
My name is Anthony Garcia, and I'm the digital librarian for the medical library.
And then once Ramses unmutes himself, he can introduce himself as well.
Hi, my name is Francis, and I am a reference and instructional librarian here at MMC Library.
All right. So here we go, right? In information in the digital world, what we covered is the fact that knowledge changes over time, right? And when we build knowledge, we're building knowledge out of different bits of information. So we're pulling information from various sources that have come out at different points in time, and some sources might be more accurate than others. Sometimes, the actual the information about an event, may take time to fully mature and build out knowledge. So we have to know that about the information cycle, and that's different depending on which discipline you're approaching your studies from. We also talked about how authority depends on context, right? Context is very important to know where who is talking about what and where they're coming from in order to understand the vocabulary, the way they're bringing forth that information. And then we talked about how media shapes meaning, right? We looked at various different headlines and how language can be coded to make you lean a certain way. So to keep that at the forefront of your minds as you are out there gathering information, looking at at the venues and evaluating them as well as the words on the page. Next, we had our workshop on AI ethics and your digital fingerprint. We talked about how we situated AI, right, as a new stage in the information generation process, right? AI creates information a bit differently than what we're traditionally used to. But remember, the evaluation still applies. We still need to put the information that we get from AI through its paces. And sometimes, those paces, as we mentioned last time, don't necessarily make the information faster, right? When we take time to properly vet information, especially when it's being used in a critical context, it may take some even longer, right, to implement, to go from the knowledge to an actual application. We mentioned how authority and ethics don't disappear with technology, right? Just because technology makes things more convenient or in a different package doesn't mean that we can just kind of check out from the ethical obligations of researchers. And we positioned AI literacy as information literacy, right? If you're going to deal with information, you have to deal with AI. So today we have some new goals here, okay? So our first goal is to integrate tools into the research process as part of an iterative inquiry process, right? To use them to generate, you use AI to generate questions, to explore topics, and to support rather than replace scholarly investigation. We're also going to strategically evaluate and select information sources when we use AI tools. We want to recognize that effective searching requires flexibility, it requires verification, and it requires movement across multiple systems and formats. And then we're going to articulate how AI-assisted research outputs fit within the broader information ecosystem, right? We want to acknowledge the roles of human authorship, revision, and validation in knowledge creation. And we're going to do that by way of demonstration today, okay? So this is it for slides. I'm going to close out the slides. I'm going to go into actual tools and actually show how some of these tools are used or can be used, right, in the research process and how to vet them, ethically, right? So we've got, here's the start of the breakdown, right? We've got some tools that can be used for literature reviews, things like Elicit, things like Research Rabbit, right? That Anthony's going to show us. We're going to go into some tools that have AI or LLMs baked in, like natural language processing, right? We have it turned on in EBSCO. We have it turned on in the JSTOR Assistant. And that's for search strategy and analysis, right, of your search strings. Elicit does some of this. Research Rabbit may do some of this, but for the most part, we have these discrete buckets, right? And then we'll look at some for EndNote AI for review, right? Review of materials that you've already collected and for publishing. So I'm going to swap this out if I can. Oh, my cursor was in the wrong spot. There we go. All right. Oh, we have a few people in the waiting room. Can you, Anthony or Ramses, could you admit?
I don't have that capability.
Oops, here. And you know what? I think Ramses, I think you're our host. So if you could give Anthony co-host when it's time for him to present. Thank you. All right. Welcome those of you who are just joining us. We are just now getting into the demonstration portion. And I have launched here library.fie.edu/AI tools. Okay, that's the website we're gonna base our operations off of this afternoon. In this LibGuide, we have things laid out using the vanity, right, of about, assessing, asking, and attributing. So we start with about AI tools. And there's a lot of background information on how these things work, how they're built out, what is a GPT, that kind of thing. But I want to call attention to the AI tools landscape that we have featured here prominently in the center, okay? And these are general, overviews of what these AI tools are good for. And I think rather than saying that this only does this and that only does that, and these things don't have any crossover, that we know that's not true, right? There is some crossover, right? You can go to ChatGPT for writing and paraphrasing, or you can ask it to do to give you an image or something like that. But in general, right, this is the main thrust of what it's good at. And I think we need to make sure that we understand, right, when we're going to a tool, right, that, sometimes, there's that old adage of, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So you just go to your AI tool and use it for everything, right? But note that there are some tools that have been developed that are specific for, that are specifically honed for, X or Y or Z, right? So as far as general purpose is concerned, right? We've got ChatGPT, Claude, Microsoft Copilot, Google Gemini, right? And one thing that I do want to call out here, right? I want to say this very clearly, right? So that everybody hears and everybody understands and knows, right? The university has vetted and is promoting Microsoft Copilot for use, right? The reason is not because Copilot is better than any other one, right? The reason is not because, Copilot is more functional or, it has been determined to be the best. It is because of privacy, right? Of the way of the licensing of the university. We're a Microsoft campus, and therefore, given its tight integration with Microsoft, and it's gone through the TEG approval process. I forget it's escaping me what TEG stands for. It's like Technology Evaluative Group or something like that, where they evaluate for privacy concerns, for holding and dealing with student records in an ethical manner, right? So that's why Microsoft Copilot is the one that we have to say, right, that is the university one, right? That's not to say that we're not evaluating other ones. That's not to say that Others might not be good for your own personal research as long as you ethically use them and make sure you're double checking to make sure you're not putting anything sensitive in those systems, right? Um, other tools that are good for other things, you can include writing and paraphrasing tools like Grammarly or Quillbot that look at grammar and try to correct that. Um, I'm not going to spend too much time on that because we're interested in research here. Same with audio and visual, right? We have certain tools that are specifically designed or crafted for generating images, music, and videos. If that's the kind of thing you need, you can look at this list here as kind of a sounding board or a place to get started. And then, of course, towards the right here, we have our research tools. These are tools that are, again, tailored to assist users throughout the research process, right? And these are the ones we're going to focus on here this afternoon. We'll show you, give you a walkthrough, a kind of a demonstration on how they work and how to access them. Again, we have databases featuring AI assistants. These, EBSCO should have been listed here. I see that it is not, but JSTOR is. So I'll go ahead and go in and update this after the workshop so that you could launch it from here. But I'm sure Ramses will also show you how to get to it through the database list. The next step would be assessing AI tools, right? And this is that second workshop where we went into the ethics and how to appropriately vet tools. So I'm not gonna belabor this point here, but just remember, we're still concerned about accuracy. We're still concerned about copyright issues, biases, privacy, environmental concerns, right? We use the acronym SIFT, right, to stop and really take a look at the information and vet the information coming from AI systems. Another place you could look at is FLAC, right? To fractionate the information, like pull out what information you can verify, use lateral reading to go ahead and vet sources, evaluate your assumptions, right? And then make that determination whether or not you're going to put it incorporate that information into your knowledge base. Again, I'm not belaboring that point. The next step that we have here is asking AI tools. Okay, and this is the one where we talk about prompt engineering, right? And there's been a lot of debate around various circles about whether or not prompt engineering is a valid concern any longer, whether the LLM is good enough to understand what you're saying no matter how you say it, right? I would say, in my professional opinion, right, that it doesn't hurt, right? It doesn't hurt to be concise, right, and clear, which is the first step in the clear framework. To be logical, right, to really think through what you're asking and how you're asking it. To be explicit, right? Say what you need, say what you don't need, right? And so that the AI can take it and move forward appropriately. And then the last two parts, right, of clear, the adaptive and the reflective occur afterwards, right? So when I teach, the information literacy or the research process, to undergrads, right, I always tell them that research is an iterative process. Library research, right? You're going to go into the databases, you're going to run a search, you're going to evaluate what comes back. After you've evaluated what comes back, you can make a determination, right? What was it about my search strategy that got me these results? How can I improve my search strategy to get better results, right? Maybe I'll try this word. Maybe I'll try that word. Maybe I'll add another line. Okay, fine. Try that. Do it, right? That's the next step. Run the search again with those improvements and see what comes back. And then continue to evaluate your search strategy while you're locating articles that augment your knowledge of a situation or of an issue, right? And and this is the same process that we deploy with an AI tool, right? You should not be just taking the first thing that the AI spits out right at you as gospel, right? You need to evaluate it, you need to be reflective and think maybe there's a better way that I could have asked that. And then finally, we get into attribution. And again, we covered this mostly in the last session, but just note that, we do need to have some transparency when it comes to using these tools, deploying them in the research process. And, we do need to disclose, right? How did we use the AI? Was it part of, part of brainstorming, or was it part of, grammatical, as like a proofreader? Did we use it to summarize and the research data so we can, kind of read more broadly, or, kind of take a step back and see the whole picture before diving in more closely? Does your professor require a certain citation style, right? And does the citation style address AI? Perhaps you're submitting your work to a journal. Does the journal address AI? Does it allow you to use AI? Yes or no? Okay, maybe ethically you need to abide by, their rules, or find another journal, right? So these are all questions that you really need to ask yourself. That I can't tell you there's one, good answer. The good answer is it depends, and you've got to figure that out, right? So going back to assessing AI tool, I'm sorry, about AI tools, we're actually going to dive in. I know I've been promising you that we're going to see AI tools in action, and I've just been talking for about 20 minutes now. So I'm going to go in to Elicit and show you Elicit, right? Now, recently a colleague told me consensus is so much better than Elicit. And I believe him, because that person is super trustworthy, and they've recently done a lot of great work. I just Elicit is the tool that I have been using and I'm most comfortable with. But these two, Elicit and Consensus, do the same kind of thing, right? They're both literature review agents, right? So here we go. We're in Elicit. It's elicit.com. I've already logged in using my Gmail account. So I do not, I have not paid for the advanced version. The advanced version does give you a lot more functionality and a lot more um, like a broader, right, search base. But this is a good overview of what Elicit can do for you as you begin your research, right? So we're beginning the research. We want to know what's out there. What kind of is this a question that's worth exploring? Maybe. So let's go in and take a look now, real quick. Where you at? Oh. So real quick, we can learn a little bit more about Elicit, and we can learn a little bit more about all these tools, right? By going into like their help center or their supporting documents to see like exactly what is it about these tools, right? And I can tell you, just as an overview, all these tools are going to be grounded, right? And grounded not only in, the world's knowledge, right, of the internet, but it's going to be grounded in a specific corpus. So I go down here to About Elicit, and you can read exactly about Elicit's source for papers, right? You can see, oh, this Elicit searches over 138 million academic papers from Semantic Scholar, right, from PubMed, and from OpenAlex, right? So we're covering a bunch of disciplines. It's a whole lot of publications, and again, it's rooted in the literature, right? Major publishers, university presses, professional societies, even, right? Some preprint servers, right? Which we know that there's some issues with that potentially, right? But just note it, right? Government sources, repositories, right? And you can keep reading on. So this is quite a substantial document. Some databases, or tools will give you less substantive information. And note that, the ones that are provided by the libraries, right? EBSCO, JSTOR, they are rooted in their traditional, right, corpus of documents. Elicit has a statement about hallucination, right? And again, their answer to hallucination is that the information they use is extracted directly from papers, right? So again, they're not going out into the internet. They're not pulling from Reddit. They might use Reddit for uh, general knowledge of how language works, right? That's how the LLM is trained. But then when it's comes down to actual citations, the citations are from their corpus. So what happens with elicit is you can ask a question, right? The question gets parsed and then gets sent out, and basically it does an initial literature review for you. If I go to my reports, oh, here we go. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. This is always the problem with a live demonstration, is that things can break. So I'm trying to load my workspace. So I had asked a question. This was actually a question a faculty member had posed to me, and they wanted to see if they could find the information. I thought, why not? Let's go to elicit and see if I can find it. And yes, it is taking a bit longer than usual. What am I doing wrong here? Maybe I'll pull another one. Well, this is embarrassing. I'm sorry, guys. How about I go back? How about I try something different? So let's go ahead and ask it a question. Let's see what happens when I ask it a question here. All right. How about I say, compare the digestive system of a whale with the digestive system of a tiger. I want to report. This is different. This is an old question that we used to get all the time in the reference department, to compare the digestive system of X with the digestive system of Y. Um, and as you can see, it's going ahead and it's showing you, right, how to do something like this, right? You would not necessarily go out and look for, and this was the issue with students, is that they would uh, want that one paper, right? That silver bullet that does the comparison for them of this to that. When really what you need to do is look for this, then look for that, and then you do the comparison yourself, right? Um, so yeah, and then you've got your follow-up. So you can actually do an extended search. Of course, you would need to upgrade to Pro for that. But yeah, you can go ahead and ask it, for additional analysis. Am I missing something in the chat there, Anthony?
No, I mean, you basically answered these. Gene had asked before if Copilot is based on ChatGPT, but I mean, based on Elicit, nothing so far.
Yeah. I really wanted to, let me see if maybe the man, for some reason it's not loading the workspace. And I'm really sorry about that, because once you load the workspace, you can actually ask questions of, Here we go. Okay. So here's another question I had asked, right, about Gollum's internal struggle and the ultimate role in the destruction of the ring, right? So you can see, that you've got this question, and then in the summary, right, you've got each paper, whether or not, like, an answer to your question, right? I asked the question about Gollum's ultimate, internal struggle, and so, how the paper addresses the question, right, if at all. Right. So let's say this one right here, transactional psychoanalysis of Frodo, it's not relevant, right? He doesn't talk about it. Although maybe it sets, and you would have to, go into it a little bit further to see maybe, what is the explanation of how this article got included into this result list in the first place, right? There may be something there that triggered inclusion, despite it not being necessarily relevant to your question, but maybe a tangential question based on your question, right? Um, so again, you can see how a tool like this isn't necessarily, none of these tools are here to give you like the answer on a silver platter, right? They're here to help you to kind of think through some things, to give you more avenues for exploration, right? So you can take it, using your human brain, right? And take off in other directions, right? And of course, you can ask questions about the results, right? So you can let's see, how does the eye of Sauron factor into Gollum's struggles? You know, no, that was a bad question. There's never a bad question. We just know that we need to reframe it, right? So we can go in and reframe that question, right? In a way that would maybe elicit more. I would need to read more, right? To be able to come up with a better question that will relate to this whole topic here. All right. What? Let me try. Here we go. Here we go. For some reason, it wasn't doing this before. Tiger. Um, so you'll see here that it was analyzing my question, right? And this is part of that research process where, if I had something like this, working in that chat, maybe it would have picked up this question about Sauron and maybe worded it better for me here. Okay. So it's saying, well, maybe be more precise, right? Maybe if I could reword it to focus uh, on research focus and specificity, right? So talking about the anatomical features of the digestive systems of whales and tiger, how they differ in relation to their respective diets and feeding behaviors. Is that, more accurately reflect what I need to find? Or maybe I should focus more on measurable outcomes, right? Whether it's enzyme production and efficiency, reflecting, carnivorous versus filter feeding adaptations, or maybe ask the question more from an evolutionary perspective. How have the digestive systems of whales and tigers evolved differently to optimize nutrient absorption from their distinct food sources? So maybe I want that question. Okay, so now my question has been upgraded, right? So here's a much better question that gets at the core of what I was asking initially, but in terms that would be more acceptable maybe to the discipline, and so on. So I can ask now that question. Let me see if it'll run it. I promise this will be my last thing, and then I'll kick it over to Anthony. Yeah, so here we go.
what the comparison you're seeking, Chris, is the difference between the digestive system of a filter feeding baleen whale, Baleen, and a tiger, which is
Yes.
carnivorous. That's what you're
Yes.
really looking for here.
Yeah. Well, yeah, yeah. And if I was
Speaking as a
really trying to
biologist,
if I was
speaking as a
really trying
marine
to find it, yeah,
biologist,
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, marine biologist, sir. Yes, marine biologist, sir. But yeah, you've got your paper, you've got your summary, right? And you can keep going, to load more papers and so on, right? Again, you can, read that overview and even get at, you've got the full text that you might be able to access from here, or grab the DOI, right, to search elsewhere to see if you can find the full text. Um, let's say for this one that you only have the abstract available. Um, where are you? There was one last thing I wanted to show, and that was the library, right? So in the library, right, you can actually import from Zotero. So you can connect your illicit um, workspace to Zotero, and that's what I have done here. So I went ahead, I connected, illicit to Zotero and brought in some of my research or some of my papers that I've been looking at that have to do with imposter syndrome and librarianship. I can go in, I can pull that information in, and then run my search through here, extract that data, right? If I had that subscription, and then go ahead and ask questions of my own corpus now, this corpus that I have pulled together, which you can also use AI, right, to build out within Zotero's Research Rabbit, which is my smooth transition to Anthony, who should be able to share his screen now and take over.
All right, thank you, Chris. So now I'm going to show you guys a tool called Research Rabbit. Let me share my screen. Oops, having some issues here. All right, here we go. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, so this is an AI-powered research tool that helps you discover academic papers, and it shows you how they're all connected to each other. So instead of just giving you a list of results like a database, it helps you more by exploring research more visually and dynamically. So let me first begin by creating a project. I'm going to name it demo. All right. And after creating a project, I'm going to start with a research question. Let's say, how does AI impact student learning? So after searching, it's going to pull up a bunch of articles based on keywords that I just entered above, or you can also search by DOI or by article titles. So let's say that I want to use these articles. I could save these to a collection. So first, I'm going to have to create a collection. Let's name it AI. And then from here, we could just save it. Okay. So this is where the tool becomes really powerful. After searching for my bad. After searching, it's going to pull up a bunch of articles based on the keywords. And this is where the tool becomes really powerful because after clicking on search, you can see how the site is going to group articles with a similar link and it's going to map them out visually. So each circle you see here is going to represent a paper. And the line between them represent relations such as citations. The small plants you see, they're shown here. These are your seeds. These are going to be the original articles that you wanted to find similarities from. So you can see how from the left, these are older articles. And as you go further right, you see that these are more recent. Instead of showing you just a list, this tool creates a visual network of papers. What this does is it shows you how the research connects over time. And if you're interested in an article, you can simply just click on it and you can see how many similar articles it has. You can see others that are references of it, and you can see what other works have cited it. This is great because instead of me guessing what to search next, the system is identifying patterns and recommending similar types of works. I can also add or remove different papers from this collection, which will change the mappings. So it's constantly evolving. The model that you're seeing here is the free version that everybody has access to, but you can also pay for the pro version. The difference is that for the pro version, you can have up to 300 seed articles versus 50 that the free version has. It has more advanced search controls and you can work on multiple projects. In terms of what this tool does really well is it helps you discover related research quickly. It helps you by showing the connections between the sources, and it makes it easier to explore a topic from multiple angles. So in short, this tool helps you by understanding how the research fits together. And that is basically Research Rabbit. All right, let me undo my sharing. Any questions?
Thank you, Anthony. Any questions about Research Rabbit? All right, we'll kick it over to Ramses. We'll talk about EBSCO and JSTOR.
All right, thank you, Chris. So I am going to cover three uh, different platforms which have sort of baked in AI and can help you with research. We're going to cover two platforms and then a citation management. Two databases and then a citation management platform. So I wanted to cover first Academic Search Complete. Actually, EBSCO in general has included this AI component. So, the way you get to, from our homepage, you could just go to A through C databases and find Academic Search Complete. So once you're here, for example, I did this search. So for example, let's say you're looking for the effects of sea level rise on property values. If you've done this kind of search in this kind of databases, you know that first you have to come up with your list of terms. You have your independent terms, your connected or related terms. You have to break down everything into, just different, use your, ands, ors, or nots. So what this does is it kind of helps out those people who don't have, like a great deal of experience searching in academic databases, and it allows you to do natural language search. So what you could do is here under search options, you can go to proximity. Here, you can go to natural language search. And what it does is it will run that search for you. Okay, it's a little slow today. Everything is a little slow today. So, it does give you the results. And, otherwise, if you don't do it this way, if you don't do a natural language search and you just, click here, you'll end up with one result or most of the times no results at all. Because when you do that, then the AI feature kind of does runs a search for you. Now, once you have your results, here's a couple of interesting things. It kind of shows you like how it works, how the natural language search, is allowing you to do this. Another thing that's actually more important is it shows you the query that the actual AI ran to get this result. So if you've done research in this sort of databases, then you recognize this. These are like all your ands and ors and your Boolean characters and your independent terms and your related terms. So for someone who doesn't know how to do this, it can actually show them how to run a proper search or how to put together a proper search strategy while at the same time allowing you to look at the results in by using natural language. Now, another thing that it does is, for example, and it won't do it with every single article, but some of them it will. So, for example, if you look and you see it says here, generate AI insights, you can click on it, and it'll usually give you like the four or five top points in in the main points of the article. So it can actually do that. It may also recommend other similar searches, which it will also perform in natural language search. So you can click here, for example, boom, it generates a secondary search. In this case, um, some of the results may overlap, some of them may not, but it will do the same thing. You find, your article here, generate AI insights, and it just kind of gives you a little, um, it's sort of like looking at the abstract, but a little bit further in depth to let you know what the article is about and whether or not you want to download or start reading the entire article. So that's what EBSCO has done. I wanted to show you what JSTOR has done with this
Real quick, before
baked-in.
we move on
Yeah,
from EBSCO, I just want to
yes,
make sure that everybody is clear and everybody knows that when we say EBSCO, we're talking about the vendor level, right? So we may be looking at academic search complete here, but if you're a historian, you're going into historical abstracts, you're going to have these same features. The natural language search
right.
will be there, right? If
You
you're
could
if you're in medicine, right, or public health, you can go to CINAHL, and
then,
these
yes.
features are going to be in CINAHL, right, and et cetera, right? You business source complete, all those source completes are from um, EBSCO. And I'm sorry, I looked away. Did you show the refined query?
I did. I did.
Yeah. So that's I certainly recommend, right, if you're you know, say you're teaching a class or if you're working with you can show them, hey, you run your search, and as you evaluate your search, right, baking that into the search process, the iterative process, take a look at that refined query to see how EBSCO would recommend, blowing out your search terms. And maybe these are right, maybe these are wrong, right? That's when, again, we got that human in the loop that can take a look at what the NL, uh, the the natural language search is doing, and and make those refinements. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So now let's move on to JSTOR. So JSTOR has a similar AI into it. It does actually may help you go into a little bit deeper. So let's take a look. First, make sure that you're always logged into JSTOR. And then let's say I want to do this sounds good. Do a search on Leonard Bernstein. Okay, let me get my results. And also, same as with EBSCO, it may not have the AI assistant um, for every article. So, for example, this article, if I believe it doesn't have it, it would just have it doesn't. So it's just a regular article. As you can see, not viable. The research tool. This item is not available. Sometimes publisher has limited use. Sometimes it's the um, okay, something happened. Uh, okay. Okay, so it freaked out a little bit. That's okay. We're back. Um, so, for example, let me click here where it says under music and law, look at this article. And this one does have the AI research tool, which you could actually toggle on and off if you wanted to. So, but once you turn it on, for example, you could ask this, for example, what is this article about? And it gives you the key points, especially if it doesn't have an abstract. Like with this one, it just goes right into the introduction. It's just very helpful to just, ask it, what is this about? And it will actually give you, a little blurb on it. You could also ask it to show you related content. So other like articles within. Um, Within JSTOR, you could ask it for recommended topics. So now we're talking about music and law. Now we're talking law and poverty, law and music metaphors. So anything related, it just kind of scours the text and looks for other things about it. You could also just plain flat out ask it questions, and the answers will come directly from this article. They claim not to go outside of the article. So actually, like when I asked what is this about, and it gave me this blurb, I could just ask it again, you know like, what is this about? And it will actually go into a little bit deeper. Sometimes it does take a little while, a minute or two sometimes, and it will actually give you a little bit deeper, um, you know, entry on, rather than the original when you click here. So for example, also it'll give you like citations by page. So if you click here, it says page one, it'll take you to page one so that you can see where, it's drawing the citation or this information for. If you go, click on page 22, then boom, it takes you to page 22 of the article. And so you can see where it is drawing the information from. For example, I clicked it using, Leonard Bernstein as my source. I could ask it, does it talk about other musicians? And it'll look through the text and identify whether or not, um, you know. So yes, the document discusses blah blah blah, and it'll name the musicians that are being mentioned in the article. You could even ask it for some sort of like, I don't know, more like self-aware. This is peer reviewed, and it'll give you. So, for example, it was published in the International Lawyer, which is a publication of the American Bar Association. While I cannot confirm with certainty what is peer review, you can find more information about peer review in general in this link. So it's not, willing to, it's willing to admit it doesn't know, which is kind of nice sometimes. So yes, let me see. Is there anything? So, oh yes, another thing that you could do is you can actually cite the AI research tool if you choose to, if you choose to add it in your paper. You could download this conversation as either PDF or as HTML. So it does have, I think it's a little more robust AI component, as in it'll give you different I'm sorry, suggestions of different other articles of related content. So, and you could actually you can like highlight. It's not the easiest thing to do, but when you highlight it, you could actually cover text, find related content, or ask the AI what is just this page, just the highlighted content, what it is about. So, it'll give you. So how media and culture affect law. So it'll give you just a blurb on like a paragraph or a page or like a chapter of a book. It can do that. So, any questions before we move on? No, we're good. Okay. Okay. So now I wanted to show you the AI assistant in EndNote. So EndNote is one of many citation management software. You may use different ones. You may use Zotero or Mendeley, RefWork, what have you. I like using EndNote, and it does have a very interesting, or a really capable AI. Now, this only works for the latest version, AI EndNote 2025. You must also always make sure that you are synced in, and so it works with sources that have a PDF attached to. So I have here, for example, I'm looking at this source. I could click on PDF. Okay, here's the PDF. I could make it a little easier to see by going this way. And then if you click on the little AI symbol, it gives you, a takeaway. Gives you the takeaway. You could actually ask it questions, um, and much like in the JSTOR, it will only look through the article itself through the PDF. So it's reading the PDF to give you the answer. So I could look at, for example, ask it, what is civic education? And it will look through the article itself and give you that. By the way, it does also take a little bit longer. I think my connection might be a little bit slow, but it does take some time. Another thing. Uh-oh.
We've had tech
Oh,
problems all day.
yes, yes, it's been kind of weird. Um, Let me ask it again. Let's change it a little bit. What is civic identity? It takes a little while, but believe I was asking it this before and it did it. So it's it might just be a technology glitch. Okay, let's just look at that. Woo! So civic identity explained as a definition, components of, and as I said, it only comes from within the PDF. Also, you could ask it to translate. The AI will translate it. So let's just. I want to. Wow. Uh, oh, something not so fancy that I cannot read it. Let's go to French. You can translate, and this actually does take a while. So, but it will translate the entire PDF into French, and then it'll ask you if you want it saved. And if you want it saved, then it actually, integrate it next to the PDF in English when it comes to the citation. So as you know, it's just something else that it adds to in order, I mean, on top of like, putting all your citations together, creating, I'm sorry, creating your bibliography page. It can also do this. Ooh, it just translated. Let me show you. View PDF. Do you want to keep this PDF? Yes. And there you have it. There is the whole thing en Vonsois. And if I close this, sometimes you have to wait a little bit, but if I close this, go back, take this off, and go to edit reference, sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but when you go down, you see, it has already added it into. So it does have it, the original in English, and it will have the translated version in French or whatever other uh, um, language you would prefer. So, and that kind of does it. Um, any questions? Okay.
All right. Thank you, Ramses. I'm going to drop a link here in the chat Here's just the last thing I want to share with you guys before we sign out today. And that is, we have a Notebook LM, right? Notebook LM is a Google product where you can build your own corpus and then ask questions. Okay. So what we've done, and it was asked in the chat earlier, can we, where do we get the video? Well, the recordings from previous sessions and this recording here will be uploaded to our YouTube playlists, right? So you can go to the library's YouTube and review it, or you can come here to this Notebook LM. You'll see the WorkSmart series, information in the digital world. Here's part one already loaded. You can watch it here. You can read about it. Right. And of course, you can read the whole transcript if you really, really, really are very bored. And then you can also review, session two. Um, and then, of course, within probably the next couple days, we'll add this session. Okay. We have the old 2025 AI tools for library research already in here as well, and some of our sources that we've used in order to present this. And so this is corpus is a group of documents, right? So we've pulled together our sources, right? It's like our bibliography, but like the full text of it, right? So here's the full text of our bibliography right here. The sources that we use to present these three workshops are all here, so you can review them yourself, or you can go into the studio, right? Ask questions. You can, you watch this little short video. AI, is it a coach or a crutch? Right? Pulling from 16 of our sources, right? See some guidelines for critical evaluation of generative AI. And you can ask your own questions here in the center, right? Ask it for, a short podcast, bringing you up to speed on, what all these, crazy librarians have been saying for the past 3 days, right? And so on. So I invite you to visit our notebook, or to reach out to any one of us individually. We're more than happy to walk you through some of these things on a personal basis, on a consultation basis, and we're available for questions even now. I think I've got like 10 minutes or so if anybody has any questions for the group. I see Frank, Mr. Fajardo is here with us today. Um, Other than that, I think our session is done. Thank you so much.